dear viewers. My name is Mark Heiker. I am the producer of the English language podcast by GLSAM. We've been doing some recent videos, which we have posted online covering the immigration topic here in Mexico. And today we have a new scoop to our online material as we're joined by Ritik Bhatnagar. Ritik is originally from Singapore. He's a foreigner living here in Mexico. He studied quantitative finance at the University of Singapore. He's worked at Didi and at Confio here in Mexico City. And he is actually a producer of a podcast on Spotify called Lifetime Value, as well as a stand-up comedian. Ritik, thanks so much again for joining us and making time for us today.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
First of all, could you please tell our viewers why and when you decided to come to Mexico? How long have you been here for?
Great question. I came to Mexico around September 2015. So I'm actually turning 5 years, I think, next week or the week after. I came to Mexico for two main reasons. One being career. I wanted a career change, and the fintech boom here in Latin America coincided with my move to Mexico. And also for love.
Is that so?
That's correct, yeah. My girlfriend, who is still the same one, is Mexican. And with one of the reasons why I came was, her family and her were like, we were going to support you with whatever. And I stayed at like my girlfriend's parents' house for a few months before moving out. So it all sort of ended up coming in together eventually. Those are the two main reasons why I wanted to Mexico.
I have the idea you can see yourself here for the foreseeable future. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. Might be a guess. I don't know.
Well, I deduce that at least. But, you've mentioned something interesting there, which is one of the topics that we're going to be talking about. Of course, love interest.
Sure.
The job opportunities is a thing. How have you personally encountered job opportunities when you first came here, and how do you see these job opportunities now and in the future? What's your view on this?
When I came to Mexico, as much as, on the surface, it might look like an uncalculated risk. I was like confident in my abilities. I had worked in banking in Singapore before, and I wanted to do something similar here. But the fintech industry was really way more charming and fun. And I feel that it's opened up a lot more. I feel there's a lot more expats right now, and the ease of getting a job, perhaps, with now the whole remote working, it's almost even a non-issue because you can just sign up and work from Singapore but be employed by a Mexican company. But at that time, it ended up being easier than I thought it would be. And I think I got lucky. I definitely got lucky. I was able to get like a consulting job with Confio almost, I think, a couple of months into my arrival in Mexico. And I think the trend has gotten much friendlier, especially towards foreigners. A lot more companies are also doing business internally and externally in English, which helps a lot rather than somebody who is a non-Spanish speaker needing to learn Spanish in order to be hired by the company. I think even that prerequisite is very much relaxed now.
So as bad as the lockdown is for a lot of people, you're basically saying that this whole lockdown and the COVID-19 response to it, the response is that so many people now work from home, home-based work, remote work. It sounds like it's an opportunity for Mexico to attract more foreigners.
Absolutely. Very well said. I think, and coming from Singapore, which is such a metropolitan city, state, country, there's a lot of advantages to having a diversified population, and you get to learn a lot of different types of ideas, and it gives a lot more room for innovation in that sense. And my experience in Mexico has been amazing so far. I love embedding myself into the Mexican culture. So, and having, you know, a Mexican partner really helps that transition as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the cultural differences between
Yeah.
Singapore and Mexico. Me being from the Netherlands, I
Yeah.
have encountered many cultural differences. Can you share some pros and cons with us? Maybe what's been easy for you? What has been preferable to you? Maybe compared to your own culture. I have things that I prefer about Mexican culture rather than my own Dutch culture. Maybe some hardships as well, if you're willing to share.
Absolutely. In terms of the basic culture, and you know, I was born in Delhi, but then I moved to Singapore when I was 7. So I grew up with Indian culture at home. And the thing is that the similarities between Mexican culture and Indian culture is a lot of them. It's almost as if I'm living in India, but like different. And they don't speak Hindi or any of the other Indian languages. They speak Spanish instead. So in that sense, it was very easy for me to get in. Everything is family oriented. People are very warm, very welcoming to people who are from different countries. In terms of work life as well, and again, I'm speaking from like a startup perspective. You know, there's a lot of work hard, play hard here, which I think something maybe even Singapore could learn from is people tend to work a lot more. And doesn't mean that they're being productive, but there's a lot more like the Asian mentality of having face and the hierarchical structure of Asian society that's prevalent in Singapore that I personally didn't see. And perhaps that's because, you know, I'm working in the startup. It's a bit more new. It's a bit more different in that sense. So I've had a lot of good things to say about my career here. Now, some of the hardships, of course, Spanish being a big question mark, it was very difficult for me to assimilate initially when people are having conversations in Spanish. But I think it's just part and parcel. You know, I knew that coming in that that's going to be a thing. So I try to learn Spanish as much as possible, especially from my coworkers and forcing myself to work with people who did not speak English. And that helped. One other sort of hardship I would say is like, you know, dealing with uh, like the governmental agencies, like paying your bills, setting up Wi-Fi, you
We've
know,
all been
that
there.
stuff. Exactly, it's a nightmare here. That's something I really hope Mexico learns from Singapore, because that is so easy and so frictionless in Singapore. And you know, perhaps we're going to talk about that as well. I've had a lot of ups and downs with the immigration side as well. Overall, it's been a positive experience. But you know, like everybody else, you know, when you're first exposed to it, you're really confused. You have no idea on the timelines. There's not that much communication in that sense. And once you kind of have the card, it's probably the biggest relief you'll get being here in Mexico. I think, at least for me, that was the once I got my like the visa, Mexican visa card. That was like the best feeling ever.
Fantastic. Well, here at GLSAM, we are in continuous dialogue with people who are in the process of moving to Mexico or people who are still considering moving to Mexico. And from them, we receive a lot of questions with regard about the language, for example. Could you maybe tell our viewers how easy or difficult it is to find your place in daily life here in Mexico if you do not speak the language?
I think, especially if you speak English, it's gotten so much easier. If you don't speak English nor Spanish, it's going to be extremely difficult. My interactions, especially perhaps I would say because you know, living in that sort of expat bubble, you find a lot more English-speaking people, or even Mexicans who are willing to speak more English just because they want to be part of the community, etc., or the partners of other expats, for example. You know, it's not been as difficult or as sort of binary in that sense where, oh no, if you can't speak Spanish, you're out. So putting in the effort or showing that you're willing to do it is usually what matters. because most people will convert to English if they see you struggling. But if you don't even put in the effort, or you don't even show that you're trying, it becomes much more harder to assimilate, I feel.
Yes, at the end of the day, you'll have to assimilate at least a little bit in local
Correct.
society, don't you?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So aside from a possible language issue, what we hear from clients or people who are considering moving to Mexico is the job market. You and I have already discussed that Mexico is a very interesting destination for remote-based work, but there are many of us who are seeking full-time employment here in Mexico. So what can you tell them about how the job market is now, and how do you think the job market is going to be for the foreseeable future? Like, what sort of skills are required in Mexico?
I'm going to speak from perhaps the fintech perspective, because that's what my experience has been. I feel that if you're somebody who has a bit of experience and is looking to change, Mexico is the perfect place. So I like, very important to have experience, or at least a bit of experience, because starting from scratch here can be a bit difficult, especially if you're a fresh university graduate. And I mean, unless you went to like very, very good school like Harvard, Oxford, whatever, you're not going to have a problem anywhere in the world, much less Mexico. But if, let's say, you want to try starting from scratch in Mexico, it's a bit harder as compared to if you've had some experience. Another thing is, within the fintech sector, there's been an explosion. So if you have, managerial experience, fintech experience, or programming experience, Mexico is perfect. At least, especially right now, because there's so many companies that are being started almost on a weekly or daily basis, and they're all hiring. Managing expectations is important. I felt the salaries here, and I'm coming from Singapore, which is also a very expensive country. Salaries were a big shock. That you're not even making, I don't know, X percentage of what you might be used to making in your home country. But it also has to go in with the fact that the cost of living here is much cheaper.
It's all about buying power, isn't it?
Exactly. So managing expectations and being transparent into what you're looking for, what you can offer, is extremely important in terms of what brings you to Mexico. So I would say, like, having a bit of experience, and if you're looking for the fintech side, that's amazing. Managing expectations would be super important as well.
Yeah. And so you come from Asia originally. Yes. Would you recommend, as you've already mentioned, some Singaporeans who've joined you now, who've moved to Mexico? Do you see a lot of people from Asia originally coming to Mexico to live here? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now that, especially from China and Japan, Japan has had a very long-standing relationship with Mexico. So Japanese influence here has been quite long. China has been a lot more recent with, Huawei, Xiaomi, all the telecommunications providers moving here to Mexico. So where I live, there's actually quite a big Chinese expat community. So in that sense, there's a lot more sort of changes happening. And speaking with my girlfriend, who's like a Mexican, even she's felt the change, that there's a lot more people coming from Asia to Mexico, based perhaps compared to like 5 to 7 years ago. You can see physically that there's been a massive change.
And so it turns out that at least for people who are from Asia originally, Mexico is a very livable country.
Exactly. Yeah, there is. I mean, and that's the perhaps the downside in that sense. Mexico has a pretty bad reputation outside of Latin America for Netflix
some of it
reasons.
earned, some of it not.
Exactly. And in Singapore, like, people would question, like, well, why are you going to Mexico of all places? And I felt like once they actually came to visit, their minds were completely blown, because it's not what you see in Hollywood movies. You know what I mean? It's not a
You
bunch of
don't see
people.
bodies hanging from bridges, no.
No, exactly
No.
not. Exactly. It's not a bunch of people wearing ponchos and riding donkeys. You know, it's a very nice society. Everybody's really high tech. Everybody's very like well off in that sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean, you and I live in a metropolis, and it's like every other metropolis in the world with its comings and goings.
exactly.
That's what it
Exactly.
is. So,
Absolutely.
you, like the other Asians and other people from all over the world coming to Mexico, all of you, at the end of the day, you're going to have to pass that dreaded immigration
Yeah.
topic, the
Yeah.
system, the whole process.
Yeah.
So you did yours 5 years ago, I understand.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
Correct.
Could you tell us how it went, and was it a smooth process for you?
I think it was confusing to say the least. And the first company we worked with, maybe they were assuming that I would know what it is. So they were just like, yeah, I don't have any updates. Because I thought it was going to be, I apply for it, sure, there's a bit of a wait time, and then you get a response, and then you go for an interview, and then you come back, boom, done. That's what I read online. But you know what you read online is what happens in theory, but in practice is so completely different. And I was very confused and also kind of nervous, like what's going on, what are they going to do? So, and I also had the misfortune of my passport expiring when I
Oh,
applied for. So I, like every worst permutation and combination you can think of, I've unfortunately had the pleasure of going through it. So I applied with one passport, and then I had to change that by the time we got to the interview stage because I already renewed my passport. So and I would say that Sarah's company, is it GLSM?
mhm.
That's like right, was extremely helpful when I was working with them. They constantly giving me updates. And fun fact, when I first went to take my passport photos, I didn't even know you needed those like tiny ones. I didn't have a bank account at the point of time, so it was Sarah who paid for my passport photos. That's the above and beyond that they went during my immigration process. So the first time I did it, I was like, okay, get it, I understand. I was able to pass on the help. The renewal is much easier. I didn't have a very good experience because uh, we didn't hire you guys again. So unfortunately, my renewal got rejected for some reason, and that is way more painful than anything else out there. So I had to restart my visa application as if I just arrived in Mexico.
Uh-huh.
So that was very complicated, and I had to leave Mexico, and then I had to come back, and then I had to apply for it, and then the 2 to 3 month waiting, as if it's a new application. Then I had to go to a U.S. like a Mexican embassy, but in the U.S.
Or a consulate, yeah.
or a consulate, yeah, and did the interview. Everything was very straight, and moved back here to do my get the card. And the second renewal was extremely easy. I did it with the law firm that Didi was using, and I got a 2 year renewal. And I'm hoping by the time that comes around, I'll be able to apply for a PR.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly happy that you're satisfied with GLSAM's service, of course. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Do you, based, of course, based on your own experience, but also on other foreigners' experience, is it a trend that a lot of companies based here in Mexico do not want to be responsible of
Yeah.
their new employees' immigration status?
Yeah, but like I've had people who have hired their own lawyers, and I also have had companies that sponsor it. When it's companies sponsoring it, especially if it's a new company like a startup, it's going to get messy because they probably haven't done it before, and it's run by Mexicans who have never had to go through this. So it's understandable that it's going to be difficult, but also, not hiring the best firm or cutting costs on these has resulted in a lot of unhappiness. And you know, it's a widespread, it's not just one or two people who have been like, oh, this is a nightmare. It's been a constant like complaint I've heard from my expat friends. And it doesn't matter if you have the Singapore passport or the Indonesian or the Indian passport, it's just uniform throughout the whole process. Hiring your own lawyer sometimes is better because you just speak with them, and then the lawyer itself has to really communicate with you and ask for the documents, and everything is much faster in that sense. So pros and cons, you know, if you find the not so good lawyer, then you're just waiting forever and you got to constantly pay money and you don't know what's happening. And that's where the company sponsorship helps a lot. But then, you know, the company sponsorship can take a bit longer. And if you have multiple people applying, then it slows down your process sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that. We're gonna finish off our podcast today on a more positive note. As I mentioned at the start, you own a podcast here.
Yes.
In Mexico. It's called Lifetime Value, and you have a career as a stand-up comedian.
Yes.
How did that come to pass? What kind of audience do you attract?
Yeah. So in terms of my comedy career, which I've been doing longer, I was already doing some in Singapore. I would say that just like fintech, comedies also had a renaissance of sorts in Mexico. Initially was just be the guys you'd see on the nighttime shows. But now, due to the success of people like Daniel Sosa, Sofia, Ricardo Faril, we've had a change in mindset of the younger people that you can actually make comedy a career. You get people having Netflix specials, you get people doing Amazon Prime specials, etc., etc. So I was lucky enough to be part of that from the ground floor. So coming up with those guys, and it allowed me to be in a safe enough environment where the standards weren't so high that I had to be amazing every night. And at the same time, it allowed me to learn from other people. My comedy is a lot about me being the expat in Mexico and challenging Mexicans to think about what, like, the terms that they use, the Mexicanisms, the certain things that they use. Why do they do that? You know, that sort of thing. Making fun of the different types of accents that they have, bringing some of the things we do in Asia that are weird and explaining it to the Mexican crowd. That's sort of been my comedy performance in that sense. On the podcast side, I recently started it, well, primarily because I was in a lockdown and I was bored and I wanted somebody to talk to. But eventually I realized that there's so many fintech entrepreneurs here in Mexico that have such insanely amazing stories and backgrounds and reasons for doing what they're doing. And nobody is talking about it. And I felt that having been there in the background since the start, I had fortunately built a good network. So each week I tend to bring somebody who has some experience in different parts of fintech or just the startup success stories in Mexico. Like the last person I spoke with was the chief commercial officer of Justo, which is a great startup on the e-grocery platform. And once a month I do a mystery guest where somebody who has nothing to do with fintech or startup joins the podcast and gives their experience. So like my last mystery guest was Daniel Sosa, who is a stand-up comedian, and he taught us what it is to get a Netflix special, like how much does it pay, how do they record, all of that stuff.
Well, Ritik, I'm very happy to hear that your podcast and your career as a stand-up comedian is hitting off here in Mexico. And on behalf of GLSAM, we want to wish you all the best in your future career aspects, of course, here in Mexico. And again, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an utmost pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun to do.
Thank you so much. And a final shout out to our viewers. Dear viewers, if you like this and if you are a foreigner who'd like to be part of our podcast and share your own experience, just like Ritik just did, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to have you on our show next time. Thank you all for watching. Ritik, again, a big thanks to you.
Pleasure as always. Thank you so much.